Okay, I believe we are live. We are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hey, Brandon. Hey guys, welcome. Welcome to the stream. Glad you guys are here. We literally just hopped on. But yeah, I think we're ready to go. Just talking about faith, Christianity, as always. En hier kan jy Afrikaans praat. If you want to speak Afrikaans, you can, yeah, you can jump on. I just enabled the guest mode, so yeah, if you are not a Christian, if you are from some other faith background, or maybe you're an atheist, I would like to know why. And maybe we can discuss it. I'm a Christian, I used to be an atheist, but I had an encounter with the living God, the one and only living God, Jesus Christ. And I am convinced that he died for the sins of the whole world. That's mine, that's yours. Yes, we are all sinful. Yes, I'm sinful, I need a savior. Yes, you are sinful, you need a savior. We are all going to face God one day, and we are going to be judged by a just God. And when that God judges us by his judgment and by his justice, we're going to be guilty. We're all going to be guilty. We all stand condemned. We all have fallen short of the glory of God. And but the amazing love of God is that in his justice and in his love, he gave us a way out without wiping his justice under the couch, as to say. Because if God is truly just, he cannot just wipe justice under the rug. There has to be a payment for sin, and that was the payment of Jesus. But that's theological. I am happy to discuss more logical and philosophical reasons and evidences for the Christian faith. Okay, we have a guest. Adjacent. Hey, adjacent. Hey, man, how are you? Good, man. Good. What do you have to say on this topic? Are you a Christian? Why do you say that? Where do you get that idea? Yeah, but the Trinity is not three gods. You don't understand the Trinity. Has nobody ever explained this to you? Has nobody ever explained this to you? They fall back to three gods, or you fall back to three gods? Oh, okay. No, I don't fall back to three gods. Just one. Yeah, it's one God, three persons. One essence, three persons. Simple. Because it's one essence. The Bible is clear. One God, one essence. We don't share the same essence. I'm here, you there. Geographical location, consciousness. I didn't say it was essential to the human nature. You said it. No, we don't share the same essence. I'm not in the same location as you are. I don't share your thoughts. I'm not talking about the nature as in the properties. I'm talking about essence. Essence. Not nature. Essence. This is essence, man. This is essence. One essence. One essence, zero persons. Okay? I am one essence, one person. God is one essence, three persons. Essence, man. No, I'm not. The essence, the thing that something is made of. You don't agree? Okay. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for calling. We can disagree about things. That's fine. But cool. I already answered that question. Yeah, you're not getting that from the Bible. I don't know where you're getting that from. So that's what you just described is not the Trinity. So I disagree. I've read the Bible. Oh man, I'm not gonna school you in this. I can tell you don't want to learn. So I just don't want to talk to you. Because I can tell you're not sincere. I can tell you're not sincere. I can tell. I have the Holy Spirit in me. Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah, you see. You see, I was right. I was right. That's a funny thing to kid about. That's a funny thing to kid about. Is that a thing that Muslims do? You got, oh, is that just a thing that you do? You're the second Muslim to threaten me with coming to my house and killing me. So that's a joke? Talk about killing somebody? That's a good joke to make. You see how the Muslims, guys, you heard it here first. I'm gonna clip this for you. Thanks for giving me a good... I am, of course I am. Man. Yeah, you can't undo that now, man. So, yeah, okay, so that's your advertisement for Islam, right there. If they... What do I have to say about my God killing infants? Yeah, my God is just. 1 Samuel 15:3. Okay. Hold on. Now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all they have. Do not spare them and kill both man, woman, child, infant, ox, sheep, camel, and donkey. Yeah, that was just. That was justice of God. Yeah. The thing is, if a human kills another human, that is taking a life, that is murder, that is taking someone else's life. God, who created everything, if he takes the life of someone, it's not killing, because it's his property. Yeah. He's God. It's his creation. We can't kill. That's murder. Yeah. I can't take the life of another human. God can. I'm not saying it's immoral. You're saying it's immoral. God is just. God, by definition, is just. For humans, yes. For God, no. He's the creator, the author of life. Every breath we give is a gift from God. You don't agree with that? Yeah. Not immoral things. It was a command of God. Yeah, but by the command of God, they by extension they were the hand of God. Make sense? No, you're saying that. I'm not saying. You're saying that. I'm not saying that. I've continually said it's just. You're saying that. I'm not saying that. I've already explained this. That God, by definition, He is the creator of life. He's the one who sustains life. He can take life away whenever He wants. Yeah. By our own will. But if we're the instrument of God, by extension, if we're the instrument of God, if God commands it, as we can see here in this instance in the Bible. No, you're saying that. I'm not saying that. You're saying that. You're going in circles now, man. You're going in circles. That's what I'm saying. You're saying this. Can I tell you why? Can you tell you why though? He ordered the killing of the Amalekites and the complete destruction. Say again? No, not at all. The Amalekites, God extended His patience with them for many years. I wish I could give you all the verses for this, but I don't have it with me. But to come down to it, the Amalekites, they offered their babies to their god, their false god. So they killed babies and infants. They committed bestiality. So God was giving them time to repent, but eventually, God decided that in His justice, it's time for that nation to come to a complete end, and He wanted to completely finish them off, so that their practices don't form part of the Israelites' belief. And we see that they didn't kill everyone, and because of that, many years later, they were still worshipping and doing the same practices as these guys. So yes, I believe God was 100% justified in destroying the Amalekites. Yeah, go for it, man. Yeah, that's fine. I'll stand by that. Okay. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming up. Cool stuff. All right. Okay, yeah, we can let me see if I can give you some details on the Amalekites, what they were up to. Let me see if I can do as study assistant. Yeah, let's see if we just can bring that up just to give some reference. Sorry, I wasn't really in the mood for that guy, because I can tell if somebody comes up and they just want to like swing an argument. Let me see. Yeah. I'm struggling to get those verses. Okay, let's see. Freddy, hallo Freddy. Jy mag maar Afrikaans praat hierso. Welcome to everybody just joined. Do-do-do-do-do. Yep. Yeah, so the Amalekites practiced demon worship and committed occult abominations, including child sacrifice to fire gods such as Moloch. Uh, yeah, so uh, do-do-do-do-do. Hey Luke, welcome guys, welcome guys. I'm just looking up. I had a caller who came in and he asked questions about, God commanding the annihilation of the Amalekites. Um, So I'm just trying to get those verses. Thanks, Luke. God bless you too, man. I assume you. Are you done with work, Luke? Are you still working? I think it's 6 p.m. now, right? There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Here we see Deuteronomy 12:31. God say, "You shall not worship the Lord your God in that way, the way of the Amalekites. For every abominable thing that the Lord hates, they have done for their gods. For they even burn their sons and daughters in the fire to their gods." So yeah, this was like really a terrible nation. And then um, yeah, and then I know that God also just, he it wasn't like the first baby they sacrificed. God sent down his wrath, like he gave them years. Um, yeah, cool, man. That's cool that you're off today, that you're chilling. I think we're all kind of in that mood to be chilling. It's that time of the year. So yeah, if you want to come and hop on, have a conversation about Christianity, tell me why you're not a Christian. Let's talk about your objections. And yeah, I would love to hear from you. If you are someone from a different worldview, or an atheist, I used to be an atheist, or if you just have some questions, some doubts about Christianity, we can talk about that. I'm not saying I have all the answers, but yeah, I just love these conversations. I believe that just in general, obviously there's a lot of Christians and everybody has their callings and stuff like that. But I think in general, if you just meet a Christian, in the street and you ask them, questions to defend their faith, they're probably not going to do a good job. But I do believe there is very good evidence for the life, death, and resurrection for Jesus. I think there is very good evidence for just the existence of God in general. And then I do believe that, you know, if there is a God, he would reveal himself to the world. And we can look at the other religions. Like, how did God, because obviously every religion is, let's say, an attempt to explain how God revealed himself. And yeah, I think Christianity is the only religion that that makes sense. If you look at all the data, if you look at history, if you look at the evidence, Christianity is the religion that makes sense. So yeah, let's talk about that. Let me quickly go grab something just from my shelf there in the back. I'll be back in a moment. All right, I'm back. I want to show you guys this. The New Testament translated from the Syriac Peshitta version. So, this is interesting. So, I had a caller on who's a Muslim. Hey, Squibity Ship. I don't know how to pronounce that. Hey, man. Yeah, cool. I see your comment there. You say you're not a Christian. Do you want to come up, have a chat, or you can, you know, if you don't want to hop on for a chat, just, you know, let me know why in the comments. Let me know what you do believe. But as I was saying, I had a Muslim caller on now, and one of the things that they would always argue is that the Bible's been corrupted. Yeah, just send a quick click request, man. You're welcome to come up. They always say the Bible is corrupted, but what I've got here is it's an English translation of the original, so it's not the original, but it's an English translation of the Syriac Peshitta, and this is the version of the Bible that historians have found was the most used, by far, the most used version of the Bible in Medina, in that area, during the time of Muhammad's life. So this is what the Christians was reading and what was available to Muhammad as well. And yeah, so when Muslims come with the idea that the Bible has been corrupted, let me see, bro. Multi-guest. I see. Don't see an option to request. Oh, there we go. Hey, hello. Good day. How are you? Good, man. What should I call you? Sorry, I'm just struggling to. Scoobity Chip. I'll do my best. Scoobity Chip. That's interesting. Where you from, by the way? Okay, nice, man. From Pretoria, but I'm in the UK now. Yeah. Okay, yeah, man. So, thanks for joining, man. Thanks for coming up to have a chat. What's your worldview? Where do you want to start? Okay. How do you come to that conclusion? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What causes those things? Yeah. Yeah. Can you give me 10 seconds real quick? Just want to grab a book off the shelf to show you. Um, are you familiar with Stephen Meyer? I mean, if you're interested in the topic, I would definitely recommend you just look this guy up. He's got a couple of books. This is his most recent one, Return of the God Hypothesis. He's got one where he basically his takes on Darwin's theory of evolution. He's got another one. I think it's his first one that he wrote, Signature in the Cell, and that's kind of his. I think like his strength. Um, so he's not a scientist, but he's a philosopher of science, and he's made a big study of DNA. So that's where a lot of his argumentation comes from for the existence of God, the information that we see in DNA, and that. So, I, because obviously what you were talking about, like we see thunder and lightning and stuff like that. It's basically the God of the gaps argument, right? Like we didn't have scientific ways to explain these things, so we just say therefore God did it. But what Stephen Meyer argues is that there are specific things in nature, and he one of the examples he uses is DNA, the information in DNA, that is so complex, and that the best explanation for that complexity and specifically the information, because DNA of course carries the information for the proteins and amino acids and stuff to obviously form machines and stuff. He argues that the best scientific explanation for that complex information is an intelligent mind. That there's no other source for information than a mind, and he compares it to a computer program, for example, the code in a computer program. And he's not alone in this. I mean, there's a lot of, I think this is like one of the big things that science actually can't answer, and he makes a scientific argument for intelligent design, based on the information in DNA. I don't know if you've ever come across that argument or thought about that. Mm. Yeah, philosopher of science. Yeah, I think that's the way. I think he did a. Might be wrong, but I think he did a PhD in philosophy of science or something like that. Let me look him up. Yeah, it's got a website as well, and papers, and yeah, a lot of videos on YouTube as well, where you can get the gist of it. Yeah, sure. Yeah. So my mom is still a Christian. My dad is an atheist. So I kind of grew up with both in the house. Yeah. I kind of, I mean, I see your point in the sense that obviously your exposure has a big influence on what you believe. So yes, I mean in that sense, yeah. But I think if I mean it's difficult to say because I am the person I am. But I think if I were to do a study of these things, I think I would arrive at the same conclusion, especially if I was open to, any answer. And I don't think everybody is always. I think a lot of people, they want a certain thing to be true, so they're not really open to all all the information out there. That's what I find. So somebody who's, for example, a devout Muslim, he's not necessarily going to be open to the evidence for Christianity. And I think the same for my dad, who's still an atheist. Like he doesn't want Christianity to be true. So and that's what I find with a lot of people. I think Christopher Hitchens is a brilliant example. Like one of the number one atheists out there. But if you listen to his debates, like, and he'll tell you, like, even if God exists, like, he'll shake his fist at God. He doesn't want God to exist. But that's just his opinion of God. Basic things, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think you sum up basically, probably better than I did, what Christopher Hitchens' position is. Yeah, and I think Christopher, the suffering is a big deal to him, right? And I think that's a similar point that you're making. Um, I would just like to, yeah, 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 yeah. You think people who are poor suffer more? Is that what you mean? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah. So I think there's obviously a lot of things to be said about, the, let's call it, the problem of suffering, and it's always a difficult topic to talk about because you want to be sensitive to the stuff, right? Because obviously, it's not a mathematical issue. It's important matters of the heart, and like you say, actual people suffering. So just with that out of the way, I think one of the important things when, because essentially what Hitchens does is he critiques the Christian worldview, right? He critiques the Christian God by saying this God allows suffering. Okay. So I think the one thing that he overlooks when he makes that argument is he doesn't take the entire worldview of Christianity into account. So the entire worldview of Christianity is that life on earth is a drop in the ocean of our existence, because in the Christian worldview it speaks about there's life after death. The life here on earth isn't really the main experience. It's a drop in the bucket. So I think if you yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but can I pause you there? Because I think once again now this is the thing, the mistake that we shouldn't make. Okay, so I'm not talking about whether we can prove this or not. I'm just talking about if you're critiquing the Christian worldview, you have to take the whole worldview into account, whether it's true or not. Because that's what Hitchens does, right? He critiques the Christian God. But I think in that critique, he leaves out the fact that, there's eternal life and that there's going to be justice in eternity. And justice means that there's going to be recompense for the people who suffered in this earth. And there's examples of that in the Bible as well, So, yes, suffering in this world is terrible and bad. But I think that's one of the reasons why Christianity actually flourishes in these poor nations that Christopher Hitchens would, point to as, poor nations where people suffer, because Christianity actually gives people a hope. And I know that's not an argument for it being true, but Christianity is actually a positive thing in those countries. And the other thing that I would just like to say, once again, if we're taking the Christian worldview and we're critiquing the Christian worldview, I think that one very interesting thing about the Christian worldview is that God isn't indifferent to our suffering, in the sense that the Christian worldview believes that God left heaven that was perfect and came into this creation through the womb of a woman, God himself. And he suffered himself, not only on the cross, but his own creation rejected him. And yeah, I think that is a aspect of the Christian worldview that it's hard to understand suffering always, but I think if we look at the Christian worldview, that we believe that Jesus is God and that he suffered for our behalf, we have to at least say in the Christian worldview that God isn't indifferent to our suffering. he becomes part of it. He takes it on himself. So yeah, that's also something else that I think is noteworthy. Yeah. Um, I don't necessarily think that's true. I think that there's evidence in the Bible that says that Paul says that suffering has, a good effect on our character. It builds our character. It builds our faith. And he also says, that famous verse. I don't know if you've heard it before, but everybody likes to quote it. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, and they think it means that I can win a gold medal and excel in whatever I do. That's not the context in which Paul quotes it. He quotes it in the context of whether I'm poor, whether I'm being persecuted, whether I'm being beaten, or whether I have plenty. In all circumstances, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So, and Jesus said himself, if you want to follow me, you better pick up your cross and follow me. Don't think that life is going to be easy. You see how they've treated me. You can expect to be treated the same way. Yeah, that's yeah. 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 I think there are very good evidence for the existence of God. I think, like I said, we can talk about DNA. We can talk about the fine tuning argument, the fact that there is something rather than nothing. I don't think um, there has to be a reason why the universe and everything in it exists. Um, yeah, the way that I would construct that argument very basically is that if we take the scientific approach and say that the universe had a beginning, a finite beginning, that includes space, time, and matter, that the cause of all of that had to be something outside of space, time, and matter. So, and that to be me would be, a pretty good definition, basic definition of God. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it could have been an alien, right? Or, just not necessarily a Christian God. Yeah. 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 Okay, so there I would. Um, okay, let me just preface this by saying that I had a personal spiritual experience. That's the thing that kicked this off for me. Okay, but obviously that doesn't help you with any evidence. I think that there are good evidence for Christianity specifically to be true far more than any other religion. Um, and for that, there's a couple of things we can look at. Some of these things take time. The quickest argument to make is the minimal facts argument that basically argues for the historicity of the death and resurrection of Jesus, without treating the gospel accounts as divine inspired, by just treating them as any other historical document. I think there can be a good argument to be made for that the death and resurrection of Jesus is historical. But I think more than that, but it takes a little bit longer to get into, is I think a very good argument can be made that the authors of the New Testament, that would include Paul, that would include all the gospel writers. I think there's basically, I call it a quadlemma. It's basically you have to, the writers of the New Testament has to fall in one of these four categories. They were either lying about what took place, so they were just making up stories, or they were mistaken, so they were maybe just repeating stories they've heard. The third option is that it was never to be taken as historical documents, that they were just really writing fan fiction or something. Or the fourth option is that they were actually reliable eyewitnesses, as they claim to be, and that they were close up to the details, and they were good people, scrupulously investigating these things and writing them down. And I think a very good case can be made that the gospel writers and Paul, they were actually scrupulous historians writing down actual history. Yeah, I think, like I said, it takes a little bit of time because it's like a cumulative case. Yeah, great. We can go over some of the things. Okay. Okay, cool. So, do you want to go over the minimal case argument, or do you want to go into why I believe the gospel writers were close to the facts and writing accurate history? Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. Mm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Yeah. 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 No, I understand that completely. Yeah. Yeah. It's just what. Yeah. 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 Um, yeah, man, I really appreciate that. And it does make a lot of sense. I think a lot of people are where you are. Just before I get into some of the evidence, can I just quickly plug something that you might actually be interested if you really want to take this discussion much further? Um, it's a service talk about doubts. I'm not affiliated with them at all. Let me actually do a screen share. So basically, how it works is you just go on the website and you submit your details when you what you kind of want to talk about, and these guys will set up a just like a one-on-one Zoom meeting with you or two-on-one Zoom meeting with you, and they will talk to you about whatever topic you want to talk about for an hour, hour and a half. You can do as many calls as you want. It's completely free. It's been set up by this guy here, Dr. Jonathan McLaughlin. Um, he's a he's got a PhD in biology, so you might like to talk to him. But he is incredibly knowledgeable about all these things. But they've got experts in a range of different fields, like you know, there's more biology, there's philosophy, and these guys are really kind of like world class in their field. I think even Stephen Meyer might be on this list as well. I don't see him here, but I think some of his colleagues maybe are. So that's just something that I want to plug. Like, this is something, talk about doubts, that you can chat with these guys about Christianity as much as you like, and they are very knowledgeable on all sorts of topics, science and New Testament studies and all of that. So yeah, that's just that. Yeah, yeah. So to get into the argument that the Gospels are written by people who are close up to the facts and stuff like that. The one of the ways to argue it is by undesigned coincidences. So an undesigned coincidence is basically when two or more sources share details that, when they interlock, they create a bigger picture that explains the situation a lot more. I'm going to give you a very simple example, but this is just to kind of explain what I mean. The examples get a lot more interesting than this. So, for example, the mystery of the green grass. Okay, so in Mark 6 verse 39, we read, Mark provides a very specific eyewitness detail. He commands the crowd to sit down on the green grass. This was at the feeding of the 5,000. This is significant because grass in Judea is typically brown and scorched for most of the year. It's only green in spring after the rainy season. So Mark just kind of makes this note about the grass is green. Okay, it's just something he kind of says in doesn't draw a lot of attention to it. But if we read in John 6 verse 4, John recounts the same event, but he doesn't mention the color of the grass, but he mentions a different chronological detail. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand, and Passover occurs in the spring during March or April. So Mark gives the visual detail about the green grass without a date, but John gives a date, it was Passover, without visual detail. So they interlock perfectly. And there's literally like probably more than 100 of these cases in the Gospels. Of it becomes very difficult to argue that these people were making these things up, where just like kind of um, without being explicit, there's so many details that interlock. Now, let me give you a very good one that actually interlocks with sources outside of the Bible. Okay, and this is regarding the date of the cleansing of the temple. So, this coincidence aligns the gospel details with secular history to pinpoint a specific date without explicit collusion. So, in John 22, verse 20, the Jewish leaders mention it has taken 46 years to build this temple. John records this architectural detail without explaining the math. Okay, so Jesus made a comment about he's going to destroy this temple, but he was referring to his body. But the Pharisees, they thought he was talking about the actual building, and they said it's taken 46 years to build this temple. Okay, so just a kind of detail that is written down, but it's not really, it isn't part of the story, it's just a random detail. Okay, so then Josephus, he was a Jewish historian writing a little bit after Jesus, but he wrote down basically all the Jewish history. Okay, he records that Herod began reconstructing the temple the 18th year of his reign. That's approximately 19 to 20 BC. So starting at 19 BC and adding 46 years, skipping over the zero, lands us at 27 to 28 AD. Okay, so that's where it would land us if this statement that the Pharisees in John 20 made was true. Okay, now if you go to Luke, completely different gospel. He dates the start of John the Baptist's ministry just before Jesus' time to the 15th year of Tiberius Caesar. Since we know Tiberius Caesar began reigning in 14 AD, his 15th year puts it roughly 28 to 29 AD. So John uses an archaeological marker, 46 years of building. Luke uses a political marker, 15 years of Tiberius. Josephus provides a secular angle, Herod's start date. And independent calculations from John via Josephus and Luke converge on the exact same time window, approximately 28 AD, for the start of Jesus' ministry. This is highly unlikely. John fabricated a number to match Luke via complex calculation involving secular history, book that he never cites. Does that kind of make sense? The idea of what I'm getting at? Yeah, I getting your point. Yeah. 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 Basically, the idea is that John, he notes that at that point of time, it was 46 years after the temple was built. And then when you look at Luke, he says that basically Jesus' ministry started in the 15 year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. And then when you look at the external evidence, we calculate that both those line up to exactly 28 AD. So it's... Yeah, that, like, you're definitely asking the right questions, because that's what I kind of say, like, this is a thing that takes a long time, because when I start showing you these things, like, different questions are gonna come up. But and that's what I would, man, really encourage you to do, all the research, because we definitely know that the Bible wasn't written by one person. Okay, there's a lot of things that we can know about the Bible. So there's obviously things like textual criticism, where people just look internally at the way things were written, and we look at external sources as well. So obviously, if Christianity is true, right? Like, obviously we know Christianity exists, at least in today's world. It's very popular, like billions of people out here. So then we can trace the history of Christianity, right? We can trace it back to particular events. We can trace it back to the Reformation, and then we can go even further back. And there's a lot of writings. We have a lot of information comes, for example, from the church fathers. So the disciples of the disciples and their disciples, because all these people were communicating and writing letters. So that's a key part of the evidence, for example. But it's not only Christian evidence, because we have people, for example, between... take this with a pinch of salt, but because I don't have all the information here, but let's say like between 200 and 300 AD, there were already like rebuttals going on, people who would say Christianity isn't true, and they would argue against things that certain people has written about Christianity, like the Gospels and stuff like that, and they would quote certain things from certain Gospels. So if we look at that evidence as, listen, we're just looking at what these people have written, actual history, we can construct a lot of things about what we know about Christianity and early Christianity. And one of the things are that we can be, I don't think there is a doubt in any historian's mind that the writers of the Gospels were written by different people. Now, people would disagree, and they would say, like, how can we know they were actually written by the people that they are attributed to, because the Gospels are written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, but their names doesn't appear in the Gospels. They don't say, like, I am Matthew. It doesn't have their name in it. So there are questions about who the authors really were they actually the people whose names are on there, and stuff like that. But that gets into a different conversation. Sorry. Sorry, if I can just give you one other example of what bad history looks like. So, there are like Gnostic Gospels, right? Like other Gospels that didn't make it to the Bible. So, for instance, one example of that would be the Gospel of Barnabas. Okay. So, Barnabas was actually a prominent leader in the church. He is mentioned, for example, in the book of Acts and stuff like that. And historians has found this gospel that was written by Barnabas. But there was a reason it wasn't included in the Bible. And for example, it makes a lot of historical mistakes. So the text mentions that the year Jubilee occurs every 100 years. Okay? In the time of Jesus and in the Old Testament, the Jubilee occurred every 50 years. The tradition of a 100-year Jubilee was only instituted by Pope Boniface in the year 1300 AD. So it makes clear historical mistakes. It calls, for instance, in the text, it describes storing wine in a wooden cask. In 1st century Palestine, wine was stored in wineskins, not in wooden casks. That was a later medieval thing. And then there's geological errors, for example. So the text describes Jesus sailing to Nazareth and Jerusalem. Both cities are inland, located in a hill country and impossible to reach by boat. So we have clear examples of what fake history looks like. And I guess one of the arguments, like I said, one of the arguments for who was he? He was one of Jesus' disciples. But the idea is that he didn't actually write this gospel. Somebody just put his name on it. So it's a pseudo author who used Barnabas' name to try and convince people that this is, genuine history. So they attached his name to it to give it some weight. And that's one of the reasons why people say that, for instance, if you take the Gospel of Mark, which historians would say is probably the most, or let me put it like a secular historians would say, like Mark is the earliest, gospel and probably most factual. Mark was nobody in the early church. Like, he wasn't one of Jesus's disciples, and it wouldn't make sense if they were to just make up who the author was. They would probably put somebody's name like Peter, or one of the key disciples on the name. But the fact that they choose Mark, and Mark was just a traveling companion of Peter, and Mark actually had he had a kind of like a bad reputation in the book of Acts. In the book of Acts, he abandons Paul on his missionary trip, and then on the next missionary trip that Paul wants to go to, he wants to come along, but Paul refuses him to come along because he abandoned him on the previous one. So it's kind of counterintuitive if the people who wrote the Gospels, they're trying to make this look genuine and authentic and give it authority, to slap that name on. They could have put a more authoritative name on it. So there's a lot of arguments and things to get into if you really want to dig into it, but it's definitely fascinating. Yeah, definitely, man. It's yeah, sure, I can. So I would say my first, and this is the thing that kickstart everything. And I mean, I wouldn't use this as an argument for Christianity because, these things are subjective. But yeah, I don't mind sharing. Yeah. Talking. Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, I grew up in this kind of split home where my mom was a Christian, my dad was an atheist. So, I guess like from the age of high school, I went atheist, I think for a lot of the same reasons as you did. Like, it just made sense to me. Like, my mom made us go to church while we were in school, but none of this stuff really made sense to me. And my dad was always talking about science and stuff like that, and so yeah, I became atheist. And but I had one friend at work who was a Christian, and I could tell this guy was different than the other Christians I knew, because I would always try to argue with Christians and make fun of them and mock God and stuff like that, and he was never like really offended. And this guy ended up being like that saying, a friend in need is a friend indeed. Like, I remember I would go clubbing and drive home and basically crash my car, get two flat tires. I'd call this guy 3 a.m. in the morning when none of my other friends would answer the phone, and he would come and he would help me with his flat tire. Okay, so that's the kind of friend that he was, and he would never be like, pull like Christian judgment on me. It was just a good friend. So I had an unfortunate experience where I was in a car accident. I didn't get hurt or anything, but I was a business owner of a AV company. I was making good money at a very young age, and I owned a lot of equipment. And basically at that age, everything that I've invested got wrecked in that car accident. And that kind of just flipped a switch in my brain. I said to myself, like, if there isn't more to life than just material things, like, what's this life even worth? Because I just realized how quickly you can lose material things. So that basically prompted me to give this God thing a chance. And I just sat down one day and I prayed an honest prayer. Very simple. I said something like, God, my name is Johan. Here I am. I'm sitting here on this couch. I don't know who you are, if you're real, but if you are, here I am. Something like that. And in that moment, I had a profound spiritual experience. Immediately after saying those words, I felt like a overwhelming, it's hard to explain it in words, but just like a rush of unconditional love that left me completely changed after that day. I was basically crying that whole day, and it left me completely changed. I used to be a guy who was very selfish, very prideful. I used relationships just for my own advantage, and that experience completely changed me. I knew I wasn't the same person after that. And from there's been a couple of other experiences as well that has caused me to believe Christianity. That's why I first believed it. I knew I couldn't understand a lot of these things with my mind. It's only later when I really started studying it that I started. But I still had a lot of questions in my mind. Like, the questions didn't go away. I still was like, but if God is real and Christianity is real, how can evolution not be true? Like, evolution is a fact. So I still had all those questions in my mind. I didn't know how to reconcile all these things, but I found in time doing studies, and I found that God isn't afraid of questions. And I really believe that if you go out seeking ultimate truth, that you'll come to the same conclusions that I came to, that God will meet you there. God is not, if he is ultimate truth, he is not intimidated by us asking hard questions and looking for ultimate truth. And that's been yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. 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 Hmm. Yeah. 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 Um, if I can make a comment, and I mean, I don't try to offend. But you mentioned that you've looked for God, and been trying to find answers. And I would, if I can give you one critique in maybe your approach, and what, like I said, I don't want to offend you, but I see this. Yeah, I see this a lot. Um, when people make arguments against God. Let's go back to the Christopher Hitchens, right? He says that um, one of his arguments against God is that he says that God is a vindictive bully, like he's a monster. God is a monster. And even some things that you've said now, like if God was going to heal you, why didn't he heal you completely? Things like that. So that indicates to me that there's a part of you who wants to elevate yourself above God, who wants to say, like, God needs to meet my criteria of what good and evil is, and what right and wrong is. And if God doesn't meet my criteria of that, like, he can't be true. And first of all, I think that's a wrong way of thinking about it, but I think there's something at the core of the the evilness of the human heart that leads to that kind of thinking. Um, and I think that's why a lot of people who say that they've been looking for answers and stuff like that maybe hasn't received the breakthrough, because they have this thing that God has to match a certain criteria in their mind, instead of saying, like, listen, I'm going to humble myself. I don't know. I'm just going to follow the evidence. God, whoever you are, maybe I'm not going to understand your righteousness and understand the way you work, but I'm not going to put that as a barrier. And yeah, I don't know. I think maybe people will have better results when they approach it that way. Yeah. But you see, that's kind of like, once again, what I'm trying to say. Like, it's kind of like your. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. I kind of got into this a little bit of this topic with the previous caller as well, and I think once again I think these are sensitive topics, but I think first of all the way the example you used is not really how I would articulate Christianity, and I don't think you know real um, Christian scholars would articulate it like that. I would look at it differently. If I talk to people about suffering, and if I look at suffering in my own life, my main reason for being a Christian is not so that my prayers can be answered, my requests can be answered. My prayers are more like, God, your will above mine. And because, once again, if you take the whole scope of the Christian worldview in mind, the answer that the Bible tells us that God has given us the solution to all suffering and all problems is not in this life, but in the life after. And that God, but yeah, yeah, but just because but just because it's convenient doesn't make it untrue. But I hear what you're saying, and that's why I say like that's where I would say once again, let's go back and look at the evidence for the resurrection, because that is what I believe that Jesus's mission was. Like, because Jesus made these claims. He said, "Listen, I'm." But can I interrupt you? What do you mean by minute evidence? Like you say, like why do you have to rely on these minute? Yeah. 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 Yeah, I guess what I would say in response to that, like when people say, there isn't a lot of evidence for the resurrection, for example. I think actually, if you look at the Bible that we have today, I think it's quite fascinating how easily the information is available. And the only reason why we go into, these minute details like undesigned coincidences and stuff like that is basically um, to answer the skeptics out there. But if you just take the Bible at face value as four people who wrote down what they saw and experienced and what Jesus said, there's ample evidence that Jesus' resurrection is true. The only reason we have to get into like all these finer details and stuff like that is because people question it. But I don't actually think there's a good reason to question the Gospels. The only reason we question it is because we've been poisoned by secular minds and secular scholars who I believe there's a good reason to say why they don't want the Bible to be true. There's a good reason, other than historical reasons, why people would say they don't want the Bible to be true, that they go look for reasons for it. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. Yeah. I just think that in general, especially in the West, we've been, yeah, we I don't know. There's obviously atheism is was it probably still is, a big movement, and naturalism and stuff like that. And I think it actually blinds us to some things that are obvious. Just like, I think there are plenty of evidence just looking at nature to be, as evidence for God. Um, yeah, you don't. Yeah, I. Yeah, not to rehash things we've already spoken about, but just the fact that there is something instead of nothing, and looking at the complexities of life and nature. Yeah, I'm. Yeah. Um, I wouldn't pretend to be somebody who knows all the ins and out of evolution, but I think there's a good amount of scholars who would push back on the general consensus of um, evolution. I'm not saying that evolution doesn't exist at all, but I think especially when it comes to the eye, and other things. I think there's actually a lot of problems, and I think once again that DNA is part of that problem. Evolution of DNA just doesn't make sense, because it's complex information. If it was just random, um, you know, evolution at its sense is just randomness. Randomness doesn't produce information. Um, and I mean, there's been calculations done about those things. And there's a lot that I guess one of the things that I would like to point that I want to make is that if you really look at all the issues of evolution as well, I think just that you have to come to the conclusion that believing in evolution um, as the explanation for life is also a leap of faith, because evolution can't even explain the origin of life. For example, it doesn't explain how non-life turned into life. It starts off with life already existing, and so I think that in the Western world we've been sold this thing of, all the questions of life has been answered, but if you actually look at it objectively, I don't think it's that clear cut. I don't think that the theory of evolution cuts it, personally. It's a brilliant, man. Um, yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Let me answer that. But and just before I go, I just want to. There's one last thing that I just want to leave with you before you go as well. So, but I'll put a pin on that. Um, yeah, I would say if I just have to answer that quickly. Before I became a Christian, being an atheist, that was kind of what I believed. And I'm actually someone who feels that atheism can be quite dangerous, because where atheism led me was to a place of actually depression and anxiety, because I didn't believe that my life had a greater purpose. I didn't believe that there was meaning to life, and it kind of left me in despair. So I know that's where I would go if someone was to tell me that, this is just there's just this life and it was all just a happy coincidence. And I think at the end of the day, there can be a good argument made that the society we have today in the West is because of great Christian values. And I think if we're in danger, if we lose those Christian values and adopt a atheistic, materialistic worldview, I think at the end it removes the barriers between good and evil, because if everything is just a cosmic accident, there's no rhyme or reason, there's no good or wrong, there's no purpose, there's no evil, there's no good, and then people, it just becomes a free for all. Why can't I just live for myself at the expense of others? That's where my mind goes when you ask that question. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. How do you arrive there? In Christianity or other religions? Sorry to be blunt. Mm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, sorry, just to push back there a little bit. Obviously, I do agree with you, everything you said about the crusade. You know, horrible things happened there, but I don't think that comes from interpreting the Bible in a genuine way. Like, sure, there's been people who've twisted the Bible to, and I think that's happened in South Africa as well. I mean, that's one of the reasons my dad became an atheist, because he was part of a church who twisted the Bible to promote apartheid and give reasons for apartheid and stuff like that. So, but I don't think if you're actually reading the Gospels that you will get any violence from there. I think, on the contrary, if you look at Jesus, everything he said, that he was preaching turn the other cheek in any situation and every situation. Yeah, and I think there are certain things that we can interpret differently, but yeah, I don't. Yeah, but once again, like, I mean, as somebody who communicates with Muslims a lot, like, that's, to be honest, I know there's been some terrible things done in the name of Christianity, but if you look at the real source behind those things, it's not Jesus. It's people who, in many of those instances were at a time where people didn't really have access to their to Bibles, and they would just had to do kind of like what people told them to do. So there's been abuse. Islam is a different story. Like, yes, Islam promote the promotion of Islam through violence. Absolutely. I mean, that's not that's just written in the Quran and in the Hadith, but that's not Christianity. Yeah, but how do you how do you bring that into today and say that that's something that should be done today? I don't. On what? Oh. Yeah. But but yeah, but can I tell you that there's still a lot of Christians today who don't have sex before marriage? I'm one of them. I'm married now, but that's not like a weird thing in Christianity. That's, I would say, most Christians still believe that. Yeah, but just, or I would say in the Western world, in places where Christianity is a minority. Yeah. Yeah, but those are also two different things. And of course, people live, like, just saying like South Africa is a Christian country doesn't mean they're actually Christian. But yeah, if they're Christians, they should have waited till marriage to have sex. And if they didn't, they should repent and ask for forgiveness. Not my friends. I have a lot of friends in South Africa. They're waiting for marriage. There's definitely lots of people who still live like that. Like, obviously not, maybe not your friends, the people, yeah, in your circles, but the people that I associate with. Yeah. Hmm. Um, yeah, if I can make a comment on something you said that I think it's fascinating is your comment about something about sex before. What did you say about men controlling women or something like that? Reason for. Yeah, so I would say obviously big difference between Christianity and Islam, but I would say that Christianity actually kind of did the opposite of that because um, before Christianity, women were in many parts of the world just used as objects. Like men could just decide when to have sex with them, when to divorce them, and stuff like that. Um, and one of the things that was interesting, I'm trying to find the verse here. I'm struggling to find it here, but um, the the Pharisees actually asked Jesus, like, under what circumstances is a man allowed to divorce his wife? And he said only if you know if she's been in an adulterous relationship. So if she's been unfaithful, that's the only reason why I could divorce a woman, your wife. And after that, his disciples, the people who followed him, said, if this is true, why would anyone get married? So that just shows you the idea of the time was that people could get married and divorce their wives and stuff like that. And Jesus actually gave women, protected women, by saying that men weren't just allowed to divorce them whenever they want. And I think furthermore that a good argument for marriage can be made as still like the best thing for society. Because if you look at, just the best circumstances for children to grow up in, it's with, a dad and a mother. That's just scientific research, psychology. And I think a marriage is the best way to create that environment for a child. So I don't think marriage is an institution created for men to control women. I think it's all about the family and about the children, really. I think a good argument can be made for that. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, yeah, amazing. Yeah, me too, man. Me too. I'm probably gonna log off. This was, this was, this was good for me. But I'm probably gonna hop off. I don't know if you've seen behind me. My wife has come home, so I'm probably gonna hop off. But I really enjoyed this conversation, man. That's why I do these lives, just to have really long conversation. We're eating leftovers. Yeah, man. I just wanna plug Stephen Meyer again. So if you just go to just Google, it's Stephen C. Meyer. If you just Google him, he's got a he's got a website. I don't know if you watch Joe Rogan, but he's been on Joe Rogan as well. I don't know if that's like a chill way for you to just get into his content. That's he's. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's got a lot. But if you just search him on YouTube as well, but I think that's yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, he is. He is. I think he's rebutting a lot of the arguments in the God delusion. Yeah. Um. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't think in like oh they didn't notice it's a Christian book. Just like oh this guy is obviously like you said you make the connection. You know. Yeah. I think that is probably the point. Um. Yeah, man. I've heard of them. I wouldn't say I know their music, but yeah, I've definitely heard of them. Yeah. Oh yeah. Bro, that's the kind of stuff that I did. That's the kind of stuff that I did when I was an atheist. All right, man. Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah. Thanks, man. Appreciate it, chat. Take care. Okay. Bye. Okay. Thanks, guys. Sorry I didn't get to a lot of people who requested, but yeah, that was just a really great conversation once again. So yeah, I'm gonna take a break. It's been 2 hours. That's a long time. But I might be back up later tonight. Yeah, thanks for the people who were interested in the conversation and stuck around. I didn't really read any comments and stuff, but yeah, appreciate you guys. And yeah, just once again, I like to state why I'm doing this. I love to have discussions about these things because I really believe that Jesus is who he claimed to be in the Gospels, and yeah, that is God in the flesh who came into creation, was rejected by his creation, but he did it out of love for us, for me, and for you, and that God is real. And then if we earnestly seek him, like Jeremiah 29:13 says, if you seek me with all your heart, you will find me. I believe we will find him. So yeah, to everybody on this chat, just do that. Just keep looking for truth. God is out there, and he loves you very, very much. All right. God bless. Bye.